the night he found the little girl in the snow. On the edge of a quiet little town in northern Minnesota, where winter always seemed to arrive too early and stay too long, there stood a small white house with peeling paint, a crooked mailbox, and a front porch that creaked even when no one was standing on it. The people in town barely noticed it anymore. To them, it was just the old house near the frozen lake, the one where old Mr. Walter Hayes lived alone. Walter was 72 years old, with silver hair, tired blue eyes, and hands rough from a lifetime of hard work. He had once been the kind of man everyone in town knew. For 40 years, he had fixed engines, repaired tractors, shoveled neighbors' driveways without being asked, and never missed a church potluck. But life had a way of becoming smaller when the people you loved disappeared. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 5 winters ago. His son, Daniel, had moved to California after college, and over time their phone calls became shorter, then rarer, then almost nothing at all. Walter never said he was lonely out loud. Men from his generation didn't do that. But loneliness had settled into his home like dust in the corners, silent, stubborn, impossible to ignore. Every morning, he woke before sunrise, made black coffee in the same old chipped mug Margaret had once bought him at a Christmas market, and sat by the window looking out at the frozen lake behind his house. He watched the geese when they came in spring, he watched the kids skating in winter, and on most days, he watched nothing at all. The town of Ashford was the kind of place where everyone waved, but not everyone stopped. People were busy, families had schedules, kids had sports. The world moved faster now. Walter knew that. He didn't blame anyone. Still, every evening when the sun disappeared behind the pine trees and the sky turned a deep steel blue, the silence inside that house felt heavier than the snow piling up outside. That December, the storms came early. The radio kept warning about dangerous wind chills and heavy snowfall. "Stay off the roads if you can," the weathermen repeated. But Walter had lived through 50 winters in Minnesota. A storm didn't scare him. On that particular Friday evening, the wind was so strong it rattled the windows. Snow slammed against the glass in thick white waves. Walter had just finished heating a can of tomato soup when he noticed something strange outside. At first, he thought it was just the porch light flickering through the storm. Then he saw movement near the old wooden fence by the road. Small, unsteady. He stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. "No," he whispered, narrowing his eyes. He grabbed his heavy coat, shoved his boots on without tying them properly, and rushed outside into the brutal cold. The wind hit him like a wall. Snow stung his face. He could barely see 5 feet ahead. But there it was again, a small figure stumbling through the snowbank near the ditch. "Hey!" Walter shouted. "Hey, stop! Over here!" The figure turned. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. She wore a thin pink coat, soaked through with snow, and one of her mittens was missing. Her cheeks were bright red from the cold, and she looked terrified. Walter's heart nearly stopped. He pushed through the snow as fast as his old legs could carry him. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" he asked, kneeling beside her. The little girl's lips trembled. I can't find my mommy." Walter immediately took off his own scarf and wrapped it around her neck. "It's okay. You're safe now. Come on, we need to get you warm." She was shaking so hard he could feel it through her coat. Without another word, Walter lifted her into his arms and carried her back through the storm, shielding her face from the wind. Inside the house, he shut the door with his shoulder, locked it, and rushed her to the fireplace. He grabbed the thick, knitted blanket Margaret had made years ago and wrapped it around her tiny body. "There now," he said softly. "You're okay. You're okay." The little girl looked around the house with wide, frightened eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Walter asked, kneeling so he wouldn't seem so tall. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma, that's a beautiful name." He smiled gently. "I'm Walter." He moved quickly, warming milk on the stove and setting out crackers. He found an old pair of fuzzy socks Margaret used to keep for guests and slid them over Emma's freezing feet. He called the sheriff's office immediately, but the storm had knocked out some phone lines, and the dispatcher's voice kept cutting in and out. They told him to keep the child warm, and officers would come as soon as the roads were safe enough. Walter looked over at Emma, who was sitting in front of the fireplace holding the warm mug with both hands like it was the only thing in the world keeping her steady. "Where did you come from?" he asked carefully. "Did you get lost?" Emma stared into the fire. "Mommy said wait in the car, but I got scared." Walter's stomach tightened. "Why were you scared?" She hesitated, then said something so softly he almost missed it. "Because she was crying." The room went quiet, except for the crackling fire. Walter didn't press her. He knew enough about pain to recognize it when it sat in a child's eyes. Instead, he sat down beside her in his old armchair and asked, "Do you like stories?" Emma nodded slightly. "My wife used to tell the best stories," he said, glancing at the faded photo of Margaret on the mantel. "She always said every storm sounds less scary when someone's telling a story." Emma looked at the picture. "Is that your mommy?" Walter smiled sadly. "That was my wife. Her name was Margaret." "Where is she?" He looked into the fire. "I think she's somewhere peaceful now." Emma was quiet for a moment, then she leaned a little closer under the blanket. "Can you tell me one of her stories?" Walter hadn't told one in years, not since Margaret died, but something about the little girl's trembling voice broke open a place in him he thought had gone cold forever. So he began. He told her about a fox who got lost in the woods during the first snow and found a tiny lantern hanging from a pine tree. He told her about how the fox followed the light and discovered a tiny cabin full of animals who made room for him by the fire. He gave each character a voice, just like Margaret used to. He even made Emma laugh when he described a grumpy raccoon who hated winter but loved marshmallows. For the first time in years, Walter heard laughter in that house, real laughter, bright and small and alive, and it changed something in the air. After the story, Emma's eyes grew heavy. She curled up on the couch, still wrapped in Margaret's blanket, clutching the stuffed cloth rabbit Walter had found in an old chest from when his son was little. Walter sat in the chair beside her, listening to the storm and watching the child breathe. He didn't know where her mother was. He didn't know why a 6-year-old had been alone in a blizzard. But he knew one thing for certain. Tonight, no child would face that storm alone. Around midnight, there was a hard knock at the door. Walter opened it to find Sheriff Tom Bennett covered in snow, with 2 deputies behind him. "Walter," Tom said, stepping inside, "thank God. We got your message. The roads are a mess." Emma woke up and immediately sat up scared. Walter gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. They're here to help." Sheriff Tom crouched down. "Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Sheriff Bennett. We're gonna find your mom, okay?" Emma nodded, but her fingers gripped Walter's sleeve. Sheriff Tom looked up at Walter, concern in his eyes. "Walter, we found a car about 2 miles down the road, skidded near Miller's Bend. No one inside." Walter's face tightened. "Her mother?" Tom shook his head. "Not there. We've got a search team out, but with this storm—" He didn't finish the sentence. Emma looked between them. "Is my mommy in trouble?" Walter kneeled beside her again. "The sheriff is looking for her, and until then, you're safe here." Sheriff Tom hesitated. "Walter, the roads are bad. If you're willing, we may need Emma to stay the night here until morning." Walter looked at the girl. She was scared, exhausted, and already half asleep again. "Of course," he said, without hesitation. "She stays here." Tom nodded gratefully. "We'll be back at first light." After they left, Walter tucked Emma properly on the couch and added another log to the fire. Then he sat alone in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the steam rising from his untouched soup. The house no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, it felt needed. Before going to bed, he stood by the window and looked out at the snow-covered lake. The snow was still falling hard, but the world somehow seemed less cold than it had that morning. Behind him, Emma stirred in her sleep and whispered